If not now, when for the crypto enjoyers of this world? In this video, we'll be going over why Bitcoin, if it is indeed bullish, we do expect it to be moving to the upside to new highs very likely within the next about a week from now. And certainly before the end of this week, we would be expecting the beginning of that move to materialize. And then, of course, we'll be going over, what to expect if that does not happen as well. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it, starting off with a revisiting of the daily price action statistics. And as always, these things are just extremely useful, very much slept on by especially shorter term time frame traders, because you can notice that Bitcoin really likes to hang out within these average ranges, and we can see that for Tuesday, it is slightly in favor of positive closures since this bull market began in 2023, with just over 51% of all Tuesdays closing positively throughout that time frame. Now, in terms of the average percent gain, it is a little bit on the lower end for a weekday at just over 2%. For those losing Tuesdays, we do experience about an average of 1.79% average loss right there, giving us a range to the upside in terms of price at about 119,900, which is nearly the high for today, and on the low side about 115,350. You can see that Bitcoin's been playing within these ranges pretty much each and every time there is a consolidation. So if you are a short-term time frame scalper, it's just a really easy way to be looking at things. And hey, why are you updating right there? Don't be doing that. None of that nonsense in my face. But ultimately, it is also a potentially good indication if Bitcoin is breaking out, because we would be expecting Bitcoin to close, well, in this case, above the top side of that band again at about 119,850, or let's just round up to 900. I think that's a good number as well. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to get into my notes because I left them off. How could I do this? Absolutely terrible. Anyways, yes, looking at the price action pivots here, I do want to go over a couple of major things. First, for the daily time frame, we can see that there is an obvious bullish bias as long as Bitcoin maintains above the most recent price action pivot low, which is 115,700, or essentially last Tuesday's low. So as long as Bitcoin's closing above there, there is a bullish bias for this asset, and it is acting, decently, just consolidating after a breakout to new all-time highs. That's not anything too crazy. But we would really be expecting Bitcoin to remain above that number again on a daily closing basis. And if it does start to close below, well, there are some problems. We probably do have some targets down to very low 110s. It sounds crazy to say, like a crash. It's a crash to 112. Oh my God, it's all over. We're all poor, and consequences will never be the same for the financial industries of the world. Anyways, my point here is that Bitcoin, again, as long as you're above that pivot, it is an upwards bias, and we are potentially even going to see daily stochastic momentum freshly turn up in the context of relatively low volatility. If Bitcoin can finish today on CME above 118,700, this would also be essentially interpreted as a trendline regression test and a success in this case as well. But again, Bitcoin must finish the day above there, and we still got another 5 hours, 2 minutes, and 38 seconds left and counting. So do keep that in mind. Again, this is coming in within the context of very low volatility over here on the index. In fact, this is literally at 1.59 percentile, so very low. Now, my damn notes keep on disappearing, so apologies about that. I am dealing with a massively reduced setup, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Anyways, yes, okay, so we got the bullish bias, we got the daily stochastic momentum pivot, and for the other side, I do want to show the potential breakout pivot as well, which is just going to be the last 12-hour time frame PA pivot high, which is coming in from what was this last Thursday's high at about 121 even almost. So if you do see Bitcoin start to trade above there, especially if it closes a 12-hour dildo above there, I really would be looking for this one to, basically retest all-time highs, probably make new all-time highs from there. I'd look at that as a confirmation of this breakout. Very likely Bitcoin at that point would follow this upper trendline extension right here, and that would give us kind of an area of interest upon that break, somewhere around about 125 to 126, depending upon the time that actually approaches it from. But again, Bitcoin caught within this range between about 121 to the upside, and then that the bullish pivot to the downside, which was last Tuesday's low at 115 and change. Well, there's really nothing of significant interest right there. And again, that's just playing within the boundaries of our average range statistics right here. So, all of these things work hand in hand together, which is why I do like this for confluence. And now that my notes has disappeared again, I must bring them back up. And I do want to go over, oh yes, okay, one last thing before we go over that. But yeah, 12-hour time frame right here as well. I do want to acknowledge that there is a hidden bullish divergence drive right here. In fact, there would technically be two coming off of this same pivot from last Tuesday's low. And again, this is valid as long as Bitcoin is particularly above that daily pivot that we spoke about earlier. So I do expect Bitcoin to give a try to the upside here. Does it actually exceed 121 or not? Well, like I said, if not now, when? And that's going to become very, very clear a little bit later on. Basically what I'm trying to say is if you're bullish on Bitcoin, I do think that there's good reason to be still. But we really do expect this move to start materializing very likely above at least 121 before the end of this week. So if you really don't see Bitcoin move in that direction, or especially if it moves in the below about 115 in the interim, then then that's obviously bearish. We can talk about downwards targets from there. In fact, speaking of that, where did I go on this one? I feel like I just left it. Yes, okay. To represent the bearish side here, is there a good bearish case? You do have the potential for a descending trunk right here on CME 12-hour. You can see the bottom price action pivot, again, coming in from that Tuesday, the 15th of July's low. And again, the high coming in from last Friday's high. So, as long as Bitcoin's kind of riding this, which thus far it is actually, there is potential for that. Descending triangle is more likely to break out to the downside than the upside. Not a guarantee, obviously, but we can make a measure move based upon that. And if it were to come back down below, again, last Tuesday's low, there is a measure move back down to a massive crashing destination of 110,000 red dildos. Holy shit. We may never survive another day in this world. But in a more sincere tone, that is a little bit of risk right there, or that is the risk if this one does fall apart. Could we apply that same sort of price action, or sorry, that same sort of blah, 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 blah. I can't speak. Could we apply that same sort of estimated target to the upside in this case? Well, yes, if Bitcoin does come back above that, again, 121 pivot or last Friday's high, we're probably looking at a measure move. I'm just eyeballing things right here. Something like this, which funnily enough does align with that upwards trend line extension. So yeah, 125 to 126, I'd be looking for on a relatively quick move. And yeah, if it's going to happen, we really do expect this before the end of the week. Again, very, very low volatility on some of our higher term timeframes, and momentum on the 12-hour time frame already turning up freshly, and will be remaining with upside pressure as long as Bitcoin's above 117,600. So, this is the chance for the boo laws here. And if you don't see this move really happen before, I would say by Friday's closure, then that's going to make me start to turn to the other side, at least bias towards the other side. But for now, still a bullish bias. And as we do progress through this, I think it's become even more abundantly clear, why this is more than likely to move sooner rather than later if you are bullish. If you're bearish, you're just looking for this one to kind of continue to stall out sideways. But for this, I want to come back to that 5-day setup, 5-day volatility versus stochastic momentum setup right here. Again, anytime we see full-on contraction phases for the 5-day BBWP, which represents volatility, coming down below about 15 percentile and then expanding back above that 15 percentile threshold there, that combined with the direction of the stochastic oscillator has led to a high, very high probability major move for Bitcoin. In fact, almost all of Bitcoin's, I actually think, in fact, all of Bitcoin's major, massive trending moves have come off the back of this setup. We've seen it many times on this channel now since about 2021, I think, is when we started talking about it, or maybe 2022. Either which way, this one is showing that volatility is actually increasing decently above that threshold. It's now at just above 21 percentile. So, we do have the expansion conditions met at this exact moment. Now, it doesn't close for another 2.5 days. So that brings us into what, Thursday? Yeah, Thursday's closure. But for right now, still does favor the upside. And then, of course, we will reference the direction of the 5-day stochastic oscillator. And as of right now, it is to the upside. The pivot is 119,300. So Bitcoin is more or less exactly at that number. Yeah, it's like $100 below that right now, but that's a fucking sneeze for Bitcoin, right? My point is that, if this one is going to have an upwards bias, obviously Bitcoin needs to maintain above this pivot, and that would require Bitcoin to, more or less rally from here, as I can't imagine that pivot will, go down on the next closure, meaning that you really, if you are bullish, in my opinion, you really have to be expecting Bitcoin to move to the upside basically from here, continuing with this move, or at least getting this move started above 120 before the end of Friday, and then really, getting deep into the move, I would say next week, new highs, something like that is probably what it would look like. So just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying that the bearish side isn't impossible here. It's just that's, what it would likely look like. Again, anything below 115, I mean, it's hard not to argue a pretty decent retracement from there. But for right now, Bitcoin a lot more close to the upside resolution of this. Anyways, one last thing here. I'll leave you with a revisiting of the quantum wave band strategy. Again, if you're a newer trader, if you're just a newer person in general, I think that something like this is good, especially as training wheels, kind of giving you high probability entries and exits in more of a down for you sort of strategy. At the end of the day, though, you can trade this however you want, or not trade it at all. It's all good. But yeah, we can see where we left off from yesterday. It did take a small loss followed by a pretty decent gain, actually longing the low of Tuesday morning at about 116,600, closing it sharply after that about 117,850. So not bad right there. Again, this is a scalping strategy. It's not like a home run hitter. It's not like a massive training strategy. It's just hitting singles, hitting singles, hitting singles. And again, we're interested in the long-term equity curve of this, which we can show right here, continues up and to the right. So again, I want to continue to update this, especially for the people who are already using this, because I just want to show that, look, yeah, you're going to have some losing trades, of course. Like any strategy is going to have losing trades, but what we're interested in is that long-term up and to the right smooth equity curve. And you can see, even despite a kind of rougher start to, I think it was like a rough end of July, it just continues to dig its way upwards and to the right, and that is a real sort of advantage of having a long-term edge. So I just want to continue to show this. Of course, if you're interested in using this script or things like it, you can check it out in the Teachable link in the description below. You can actually try it even for 7 days free. In fact, as you can see, all of our major offerings do have a 7-day free trial for any new user. Even the price action pivots as well, which is actually not shown here. But yeah, I think that's where we leave it for today. Again, if not now, then when? Or if not now, then down is probably more accurate. But yeah, I think the Bullish got another hurrah here, and this still, to me at least, is looking like a classic breakout, stall, continuation. We see this quite often for Bitcoin. And as always, when things don't move up in a straight fucking line, every little tick is up, then people get bearish, and vice versa as well, right? But at the end of the day, markets ebb and flow naturally, just like water. And for that reason, we must be patient. Well, maybe not patient, but just have a realistic view of this. Anyways, that's where I'm going to leave for today. As always, wishing you the best of best. Again, I should remind myself to let everyone know that we're traveling, we're visiting family, doing all that sort of stuff right now. So, I'm dealing with a massively reduced setup, as is Elsa. We're doing our best to get around to everything, but right now I'm kind of prioritizing family time. I hope people do understand. I still look at this as somewhat of a quiet time in the market, but I'm really trying to time everything so that I'm at full speed, ready to, do my own business, but also, do the old YouTube thing as well, in a more substantial manner, doing a lot of live streams, probably by the beginning of August is what I'm aiming for. So yeah, anyways, as always, wish you the best of best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully next time.